I am staring at this empty bank statement, and I cannot believe what I am seeing. 22 years old, and my entire college fund has vanished. 6 years of working part-time jobs, saving every penny I could scrape together, all gone. My name is Hazel, and this is not just about money. This is about discovering that in my own family, I was never the priority. My parents always said family comes first, but apparently that only applied to my golden sister, Sophia. What happened next changed everything and showed me that sometimes the biggest betrayal comes from the people who are supposed to love you most. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because trust me, what happened next will leave you absolutely speechless. You will not believe how far parents can go to favor one child over another. Let me take you back 6 years to when this whole mess started. I was 16, Sophia was 10, and our family looked perfect from the outside. Dad worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, Mom was a registered nurse at the local hospital, and we lived in a decent 3-bedroom house in suburbia. But even then, I could see the difference in how my parents treated us. When school shopping time came around, Sophia would get brand new designer clothes from the mall. I would get a $50 budget and a trip to the thrift store. When Sophia wanted a new bike, Dad would drive straight to the bike shop and buy her a shiny red mountain bike with all the accessories. When I asked for help buying textbooks for my advanced placement classes, Mom would sigh and say, we needed to watch our spending. The breaking point came when I was a junior in high school. Sophia had been accepted into this expensive summer dance program that cost $3,000. Without hesitation, Mom and Dad started planning how to pay for it. That same week, I had been accepted into a competitive business internship that would look incredible on college applications. The only catch was that I needed to provide my own transportation to the downtown office every day. I asked if I could borrow the car or if they could help with gas money. Dad looked at me like I had asked for the moon. He said I was old enough to figure things out for myself and that Sophia needed their support more because she was younger. That night, I made a decision that would define the next 6 years of my life. I was going to become completely financially independent. I walked into Mario's Pizza Palace the next morning and asked for a job. The manager, a kind older man named Frank, hired me on the spot to work evening shifts during the school week. The pay was not great, but it was a start. Within a month, I had added weekend babysitting for our neighbors, the Hendersons, who paid me well to watch their twin toddlers. By the time senior year started, I was also tutoring younger kids in mathematics after school. Every 2 weeks when I got paid, I would deposit 80% of my earnings into a savings account I had opened specifically for college. I kept just enough money for gas and lunch at school. While Sophia was getting weekly shopping trips and expensive extracurricular activities, I was building my future one shift at a time. My parents seemed almost relieved that I was handling my own expenses. Mom would say things like, "Hazel, honey, it is so good that you are learning to be independent. Sophia still needs us to take care of her." Dad would nod and add that I was the responsible one, like it was some kind of consolation prize for being ignored. Meanwhile, Sophia was blossoming into what everyone called a natural beauty. She had long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and the kind of confidence that only comes from never hearing the word no. Her room was filled with expensive clothes, the latest technology, and trophies from various activities that my parents paid for without question. At family dinners, the conversation always centered around Sophia's achievements and needs. She would talk about wanting to join the competitive cheerleading team, which required a $2,000 uniform and monthly fees. My parents would immediately start discussing how to make it happen. When I mentioned that I had been accepted into the National Honor Society, they would give me a quick congratulations before turning back to planning Sophia's next adventure. By my senior year, I had saved nearly $20,000. I had researched everything about State University's business program, calculated exactly how much I would need for tuition room and board textbooks and living expenses. The total came to approximately $45,000 for 4 years. I was so proud when I showed my parents my savings account statement and my detailed budget. Dad looked impressed for the first time in years. He said I had done an amazing job and that he and Mom would help with the remaining amount I needed. Mom hugged me and said she was proud of how mature and responsible I had become. For a moment, I felt like I was finally getting the recognition I had worked so hard for. But even in that moment of family harmony, I noticed something that should have been a warning sign. When Sophia walked into the room and saw us celebrating my college fund, her expression changed. She did not look happy for me. Instead, she looked almost annoyed, like my achievement was somehow taking attention away from her. As I entered my senior year of high school, things began to shift in ways that made me uncomfortable. Sophia, now 14, had developed not just beauty, but also an expectation that the world should revolve around her desires. She had grown accustomed to getting whatever she wanted whenever she wanted it, and my parents continued to enable this behavior without question. The first red flag came during Christmas of my senior year. I checked my college fund balance as part of my regular monthly review, and instead of the expected $28,000, the account showed only $21,000. I stared at the screen for several minutes, thinking there must be some mistake. When I brought the bank statement to my parents, Dad looked uncomfortable, and Mom avoided eye contact. Finally, Dad cleared his throat and explained that they had needed to make some temporary investments and had borrowed a small amount from my account. He assured me that they would replace the money with interest before I started college. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but I tried to trust them. These were my parents, after all. They had raised me to be responsible with money, so surely they understood how important this college fund was to my future. I decided to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I also started checking my account balance more frequently. Meanwhile, Sophia was entering what my parents called her princess phase. She had discovered social media and was constantly showing them pictures of other teenagers with expensive clothes, elaborate bedrooms, and luxurious birthday parties. She would scroll through Instagram and point out girls from wealthy families, saying things like, "Look how beautiful Madison's Sweet 16 party was," or "Emma got a brand new car for her birthday." My parents would look at these images with Sophia and make comments about how nice it would be to give her experiences like that. I would remind them that we were a middle-class family, and that kind of spending was not realistic for our budget. But instead of agreeing with me, they would get defensive and say that Sophia deserved to have nice things. The situation escalated when Sophia turned 15. Instead of a normal family birthday celebration, my parents threw her a party that cost over $2,000. They rented a venue, hired a DJ, and invited half of her high school class. When I asked where the money had come from, Mom said they had been saving for special occasions. But I knew they had not been saving anything extra. Dad's salary was steady, but not extravagant, and Mom's nursing income was good, but not enough for this kind of spending. I began to suspect that more money had been taken from my college fund, but when I checked my account, the balance had actually increased slightly from my continued deposits. It was not until months later that I discovered they had opened a credit card to pay for Sophia's party. This revelation came accidentally when I was helping Mom organize bills and saw a statement for a card I did not recognize. The balance was significant, and the minimum payments were straining their monthly budget. When I asked about it, Mom broke down crying. She said that Sophia had been so excited about having a real party and that all of her friends had such nice celebrations. Mom felt terrible about not being able to provide the same level of luxury that other parents could offer. Dad supported her decision, saying that they could not let Sophia feel less important than her classmates. I tried to explain that teaching Sophia to be grateful for what we had would be more valuable than going into debt for parties. But my parents looked at me like I was being cruel and selfish. They said I did not understand because I had never been as social as Sophia and that different children have different needs. As Sophia's 15th year progressed, her demands became more frequent and expensive. She wanted designer clothes for school professional photography sessions, for her social media profiles, and enrollment in exclusive clubs that charged membership fees. Each request was met with immediate planning from my parents about how to make it happen. The breaking point was approaching But I did not see it coming. Sophia had started talking about her sweet 16 party while she was still 15. She would spend hours on her phone showing my parents elaborate party ideas from Pinterest and YouTube. The parties she admired cost tens of thousands of dollars and included everything from live bands to custom-designed decorations. At first, I thought it was just teenage dreaming. Even my parents seemed to think her ideas were too extravagant. But as her 16th birthday got closer, I started noticing that instead of discouraging her unrealistic expectations, they were beginning to take notes on her favorite ideas. The conversations at dinner began to revolve around venues and guest lists. Sophia would announce that she wanted to invite 200 people, and instead of explaining why that was impossible, my parents would ask questions about catering options and space requirements. I felt like I was watching my family lose touch with reality. When I tried to inject some financial sense into these discussions, Sophia would get angry and accuse me of trying to ruin her dreams. My parents would defend her, saying that I was being negative and that we should focus on making Sophia's special day memorable. I began to feel like an outsider in my own family, like the responsible voice that nobody wanted to hear. The real nightmare began 3 months before Sophia's 16th birthday. I was checking my college fund balance in preparation for submitting my deposit to State University when I saw a number that made my heart stop. Instead of the $38,000, I expected there were only $15,000 in the account. I printed the statement with shaking hands and marched into the living room where my parents were watching television. I placed the paper on the coffee table and asked them to explain where $23,000 had gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom started crying immediately. Dad stared at the paper like it might change if he looked at it long enough. Finally, Mom whispered that they had needed to make some arrangements for Sophia's party, and that they would find a way to replace the money before I needed it for college. I could barely breathe. $23,000 represented years of my life. Every evening shift at the pizza place, every weekend, spent babysitting every tutoring session after school. Those were hours of my teenage years that I had sacrificed to build a future for myself. And my parents had taken that future to throw a party. When I asked for details, the truth came out in pieces. They had not just taken money from my account. They had also taken out a loan against their retirement fund and applied for multiple credit cards. The party they were planning for Sophia was going to cost over $40,000. $40,000. That was almost exactly what I had calculated I would need for my entire college education. My parents were spending my future education on one night of celebration for my sister. I tried to remain calm and explain the math to them. I showed them my budget spreadsheets, my acceptance letters, my scholarship applications. I explained that without this money, I would not be able to attend college in the fall. Their response was devastating. Dad said that I was smart enough to find scholarships or get student loans. Mom said that I could always attend community college first and transfer later. They both insisted that Sophia's 16th birthday was a once-in-a-lifetime event that could not be postponed or scaled back. When I asked why Sophia's party was more important than my education, Mom said something that I will never forget. She said that Sophia was beautiful and charming, and that these qualities would open doors for her throughout life. She said that I was intelligent and capable, and that those qualities meant I would always be able to find a way to succeed, even without their help. In other words, they believed that Sophia needed their investment because her value came from her appearance and social skills. They believed that I did not need their investment because my value came from my intelligence and work ethic. They were betting on Sophia's beauty and betting against my abilities. That night, Sophia found me crying in my room. Instead of offering comfort, she asked if I was going to try to ruin her party. She said that everyone at school was already talking about how amazing it was going to be, and that she could not face her friends if it got canceled. She accused me of being jealous of her popularity and suggested that maybe it was good for me to learn that I could not always get what I wanted. I realized in that moment that Sophia had no understanding of sacrifice or hard work. She had lived her entire life having her desires fulfilled by other people's efforts. She genuinely believed that her wants were more important than my needs, because that was what our family had always taught her through their actions. The final straw came when I suggested compromises to save money. What if we had the party at our house instead of renting a venue? What if we invited 50 people instead of 200? What if we hired a playlist instead of a live band? Every suggestion I made was shot down by both Sophia and my parents. They had already put deposits down on everything. The venue was booked, the caterers were hired, the photographer was scheduled. They had committed to spending money they did not have to create an event that would last 6 hours and leave our family in financial ruin. When I pointed out that they would be paying for this party for years through credit card debt, Dad said that some things were worth going into debt for. When I asked if my education was worth going into debt for, he said that was different, because I could take out student loans in my own name. The hypocrisy was staggering. They were willing to ruin their own financial stability to pay for Sophia's party, but they expected me to take on debt for my education. They were willing to sacrifice my college fund for her celebration, but they were not willing to sacrifice her celebration for my college fund. As the party date approached, I watched my parents stress about money while simultaneously pretending everything was fine. They were working extra hours, skipping family dinners to take on additional shifts, and constantly checking credit card balances. The party that was supposed to make Sophia happy was making everyone else miserable, but they refused to acknowledge this reality. The night before Sophia's party, I made one final check of my college fund account. $3,000. That was all that remained of 6 years of sacrifice. I sat in my car outside the bank staring at the ATM receipt and felt something break inside my chest. When I arrived home, the house was in chaos. Decorators were setting up for the next day's event, caterers were delivering supplies, and Sophia was having a meltdown because her custom-designed dress did not fit exactly the way she had imagined. My parents were running around trying to solve every problem while ignoring the biggest problem of all. They had destroyed their family's financial stability for one night of teenage celebration. I tried one last time to talk to them. I sat them down after the decorators left and explained that it was not too late to scale back the party. We could return some of the more expensive items, reduce the guest list, and use the savings to restore at least part of my college fund. I promised I would help with the party planning and would not complain about any compromises they wanted to make. Their response was swift and final. Mom said that too much had already been invested to change course now. Dad said that disappointing Sophia at this point would be cruel and unfair. They both insisted that I would find another way to pay for college, but that Sophia would never have another chance to turn 16. The party itself was everything Sophia had dreamed of, and everything I had feared. The venue was a ballroom at the most expensive hotel in our city. There were ice sculptures, champagne fountains, and floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. A professional photographer captured every moment a live band played Sophia's favorite songs, and 200 guests celebrated as if they were attending a royal wedding. Sophia looked absolutely radiant. Her custom-designed gown sparkled under the ballroom lights. Her professional makeup was flawless, and her diamond jewelry caught every camera flash. She was the center of attention in exactly the way she had always dreamed of being. For 6 hours, she was treated like the most important person in the world. I stood in the corner of the ballroom wearing a 3-year-old dress from my high school prom, watching $42,000 disappear in real time. Every song the band played, every bite of gourmet food, every glass of champagne represented hours of my teenage life that I would never get back. I was watching my future evaporate while everyone around me celebrated. The worst moment came during Sophia's thank you speech. She stood at the microphone in her beautiful gown, surrounded by flowers and lights, and thanked my parents for making her dreams come true. She talked about how lucky she was to have parents who loved her enough to give her such an incredible celebration. She mentioned the venue, the food, the band, and the decorations. She did not mention me. She did not mention the 6 years I had worked to save money that helped pay for her party. She did not acknowledge that my college fund had been sacrificed for her celebration. In her mind, this party was entirely the result of our parents' love and generosity. She had no idea that it was also the result of my sacrifice. When people asked my parents about my college plans, they gave vague answers about scholarships and student loans. They spoke as if my education was entirely my responsibility, while Sophia's party had been their pleasure to provide. The double standard was obvious to everyone except my parents and my sister. As the evening wore on, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done waiting for my parents to recognize my value. I was done hoping that they would treat me with the same consideration they showed Sophia. I was done being the responsible child who always came second to the fun child. That night, I went home and began planning my exit from their household. I researched apartments I could afford on my remaining $3,000 and my part-time income. I looked into full-time jobs that would provide enough money for me to attend community college part-time. I started imagining a life where my value was not determined by comparison to my sister. For the first time in years, I felt something that I had almost forgotten: hope. Not hope that my parents would change, or hope that Sophia would develop empathy, but hope that I could build a life that did not depend on either of those things happening. 1 week after Sophia's party, I moved out of my childhood home with everything I owned packed into my beat-up Honda Civic. I'd found a tiny studio apartment 15 minutes from downtown where I could afford the rent on my part-time income if I was careful with every other expense. My parents were shocked when I announced my decision. They had expected me to be upset about the college fund, but they had not expected me to leave home. Dad asked where I thought I was going to get money for college if I was wasting money on rent. Mom cried and said that I was breaking up our family over money. I explained to them that this was not about money. This was about respect priorities and the kind of relationship I wanted to have with people who were supposed to love me. I told them that I would rather build my own life than continue to live as a second-class member of their family. The first year of independence was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I worked 50 hours a week at a marketing company that hired me as an administrative assistant. I attended community college classes 3 evenings a week, slowly working toward transferring to a 4-year university. I cooked all my own meals, did my own laundry, and learned to fix everything that broke in my tiny apartment. But something amazing happened during that difficult year. I discovered that I was capable of far more than I had ever imagined. Without my parents' money, I learned to be resourceful. Without their approval, I learned to trust my own judgment. Without their priorities dictating my choices, I learned what I actually wanted from life. I applied for every scholarship I could find and wrote essays about overcoming financial hardship. I networked with professors and professionals in my field, building relationships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. I saved money from my job and gradually built up a new college fund that belonged entirely to me. Meanwhile, my family was struggling with the consequences of their choices. The credit card debt from Sophia's party was substantial, and my parents were working extra hours to make minimum payments. Sophia had returned to her normal life after the party high wore off, but she had developed expensive tastes that were difficult to satisfy on a strained budget. 6 months after I moved out, Mom called to tell me that Sophia was having trouble in school. Without the constant attention and resources that had been lavished on her before the party, Sophia was struggling to maintain the image she had created. Her grades were dropping. She had been kicked off the cheerleading team for missing too many practices, and she was constantly fighting with my parents about money. Mom asked if I would consider coming home to help Sophia get back on track. She suggested that maybe I could tutor Sophia in math and help her develop better study habits. I politely declined and explained that I was focused on my own education and career development. A year later, I transferred to State University as a junior, with a partial scholarship and enough savings to cover the remaining costs. I was studying business administration just like I had always planned. But I was doing it on my own terms, with money I had earned through my own efforts. Sophia, meanwhile, had dropped out of community college after one semester. She was 19 years old, living at home with my parents, and had no job or educational goals. The beauty and charm that my parents had invested in so heavily had not translated into independence or success. She was still waiting for someone else to solve her problems and provide for her needs. My parents finally reached out to apologize 2.5 years after I moved out. Dad admitted that they had made a terrible mistake in prioritizing Sophia's party over my education. Mom cried as she explained how much they missed having me in their lives and how much they regretted not recognizing my value until it was too late. I accepted their apology, but I also made it clear that our relationship would need to be rebuilt on different terms. I was no longer willing to be the child who sacrificed her needs for the family's comfort. I was no longer interested in competing with Sophia for their attention or approval. I had learned to value myself, and I expected them to do the same. Today, I am 25 years old with a college degree, a management position at a respected company, and my own apartment in the city. I have a healthy relationship with a partner who treats me as an equal, and I have built a life based on my own values and priorities. I maintain a polite but distant relationship with my parents. We have dinner together once a month, and I answer their phone calls when they need advice about financial planning or Sophia's latest crisis. But I no longer look to them for emotional support or validation. I found those things within myself during the years when I had no other choice. Sophia and I rarely speak, but I wish her well. I hope that someday she will learn the satisfaction that comes from earning something through her own efforts. I hope that she will discover her own talents and develop her own sense of purpose. But those discoveries are hers to make, and they are not my responsibility. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that love should never cost you your dreams. Real love supports your goals, celebrates your achievements, and encourages your independence. The people who truly care about you will never ask you to sacrifice your future for their comfort. I also learned that sometimes the greatest gift your family can give you is teaching you that you do not need them to succeed. Independence is not just about money. It is about knowing that your worth does not depend on other people's choices, and that you have the power to create a meaningful life, even when the people who should support you choose not to. If you are in a situation where your family is not treating you with the respect you deserve, remember that you have more power than you think. You cannot control their choices, but you can always control your own. You cannot force them to value you, but you can learn to value yourself. And sometimes that is the most important lesson of all. What experiences have you had with family favoritism or financial betrayal? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own future? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and do not forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Please subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building independence. Share this with someone who might need to hear that they have the strength to create their own path, even when their family does not support their dreams. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to treat yourself.